Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final live roundtable here at the 2022 ILET Summit. Today, we're going to be talking all about the future of policing. It's an appropriate conversation to have as we wrap up the week of amazing training here at the ILET Summit. It has been, we've had so many officers reach out and just to say thank you to the instructors, which has been absolutely amazing. And if you are attending some of these training sessions and you haven't yet, please reach out to these instructors and these trainers that are donating their time and their energy and their resources to get this training out to you. They're doing it solely because they believe that things like this, things like the ILET Summit, can really help change the standard of law enforcement. So hopefully you're able to do that and take advantage of more training coming down the road. So today's conversation on the future of policing is going to be a good one. We have an amazing panel here for you. And what we're going to be doing is once we actually get the panel on board, we'll let everybody introduce themselves and we'll move things forward. We are going to cover real quickly, though, with the ILET Summit. I want to let everybody know we have extended our access to the event for another week. So December 16th is now the day. So you have a whole nother week, including the weekend, to absorb all of the training content. So please make sure, if you haven't already, to share this with your friends, your colleagues, agencies. It is a free training resource. So the more people we get on it, the better. Additionally, we are extending the date to sign up for the raffle and to purchase our I Got Your Six shirts. If you're not already familiar, I'm sure you've heard me talk about this ad nauseum this week, but we have our I Got Your Six program that we run each and every year. 100% of the profit goes to officer mental health. And this year, all of that is going to our friends at Blue Help. Blue Help is an amazing organization. You can go to bluehelp.org to check them out. But these shirts are limited edition. They're one time only. So if you miss out getting these before Christmas, you're never going to see them again. We only do one run on them, and then we change the design each and every year. So if you do like that kind of stuff, please consider purchasing one of those. Buy it for your friends, buy it for your family. They are extremely comfortable. We spare no expense because if it's not comfortable, why would you wear it? So check those out. And with that being said, what I'd like to do is bring the panel on and start this discussion. So make sure I add the correct. There we go. Gentlemen, thank you guys so much for taking the time and joining me on this Friday afternoon. I really appreciate it. What I would love to do is I would love to go around the horn and let everybody just introduce themselves real briefly. And then we're going to cover some housekeeping points for ILET and some surprises that I think some of you are going to, even the people on the panel aren't even aware of. So Andy, why don't we start with you, brother?
Hey, good afternoon or morning, wherever you are. My name is Andy Wren. I'm the head of training here at Axon.
Wow, that was short and concise, brother. I appreciate that. Zero background, zero history. He's really a man of mystery, if you think about it. Graham, go ahead, dude.
Good afternoon. My name is Graham Tinius. I am currently a police officer in Utah, but I'm here because I'm the training coordinator for the National Association of Field Training Officers. I'm one of the executive board members, and then I do all the logistics for the classes behind the scenes for FTO training across the country.
Awesome. And for those of you, I know you've seen NAFTO as part of ILET before. They're one of our strategic partners here. And if you are an FTO, we are going to make sure that you understand who NAFTO is and what NAFTO does, because if you're not already hooked up with them, you should be. And so we're going to be contacting you about that. Dr. Black.
Yeah, hi, John Black. You can take a look at some of the stuff I do just by looking at day 4. I've got a presentation there. Long and short is I consult. I focus on the areas of sense making, systems thinking, and those type of stuff. I'm a certified trainer, advanced force science analyst, hold a doctorate in business intelligence and how people make decisions. Currently working on my second master's, first being in counterterrorism, 30 plus years in special operations, 23 years with policing. Biggest takeaway is I swore my life to service of others a long time ago, so I'm here to help.
Well, I appreciate you being here. And last but certainly not least, Liam.
Good afternoon, everybody. Liam Duggan, going into year 26 police officer in the state of Minnesota for a couple different agencies, suburban and in the inner city. Chief of police now for a suburb out here specializing, if that word means much anymore these days, in kind of the human factors part of policing, decision making, and that kind of world. So really happy to be here. Appreciate the opportunity, Adam, and the rest of the panel.
Oh, I'm excited to have you, brother. And so let's start this off on the right foot. One thing I do want to do is I want to just give a quick shout out to our sponsors for today's session. Obviously, API International Consulting Group is the sponsor for day 5 here at the ILET Network. It is an international organization of just some of the highest level experts. They do investigations, they do training, they do intelligence, and they are one of our partners here at ILET, and couldn't be more excited to have them as a resource. Additionally, Axon is the sponsor for today's conversation here on the futures of policing, which is appropriate because of all the amazing work that Axon does. And if you aren't already up to speed, there's a summit or a conference coming up in January 23rd to 26th called TaserCon. It's taking place in Las Vegas. I will be there. I will be speaking. A lot of the instructors that you saw here this week, including Rob Chadwick, Paul Butler, and many more, will be there speaking as well. And Andy, real quick, brother, since it is your show, TaserCon was kind of your baby. Do you want to just give a quick 30 seconds on what people can expect there?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. We're super pumped about TaserCon. It's for those of you who have been around Axon for a while. We have a phenomenal conference around technology, specifically called Axon Accelerate, and we wanted to build something that was more human focused. So we thought about this for a couple of years and designed just a really core conference around officer wellness, vitality, how suicide and depression affect critical decision making. And so we've got a lot of experts and instructors from all over the country and all over the world coming in to speak that week. Tasercon.com will give you a sense of what it's going to feel like. And we're almost at capacity. So hurry up and register if you're interested in coming. We're super pumped about TaserCon.
Well, I'm excited to be there. Obviously, too, it might be a little much for me because I have to now spend 2 weeks in Vegas because obviously we're there for SHOT Show first. So that is going to put a toll on my liver, but we'll make it work. So what I want to do
it's a marathon. It's a marathon, Adam.
What I want to do is one thing we do every single year at ILET is we and I say every year, we started it last year. So this is the second year that we're doing it. We announce an international instructor of the year. And this, I'm extremely excited for this one today. Scott Savage was the winner of last year's inaugural award. And when we tried to figure out how we were going to come up with this year's recipient. And so I reached out to Scott and I asked him for his nomination. And I reached out to a lot of people that are associated with ILET, and I asked for their nominations with the different companies and associations that we work with. And we settled in on one person. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to congratulate our 2022 instructor of the year, Mr. Liam Duggan. So, Liam, I know you didn't expect this. I know this was I kind of goaded you into joining a roundtable discussion. But brother, I got to tell you, I had the opportunity to see you present at For Science this year. And a lot of other people have been reaching out to me talking about all of the amazing work that you've been doing. And so I actually have a few things here. I had a few people write some words. Scott, I'm gonna read to you Scott's nomination that he sent me. I put a little thing together here for you. My nomination for the 2022 Instructor of the Year would have been one of. Oh, I don't know if that didn't work. Hang on a second here. Let's see if we can get this to work. Okay. Well, that one doesn't work. Here is a write-up that was done by your friend Scott Burmaster at Caliber Press. Liam has been an extremely valuable member of the Caliber Press instructional team for many years. The announcement that he has been named the 2022 ILET. Wow, none of these videos want to work today, guys. Hang on a second. I got this. This is not how we do things here at ILET. Hang on a second. Let me get this squared away for you. Okay. Good.
As
have
long
back.
as that caliber picture doesn't show up again. That was a perfect.
No, I
little
found
freeze
that.
frame.
I had to go down a rabbit hole to find that. So it is, I'm going to make sure it's posted so that everybody can see it. All right, here we go. I got this. Sorry for the delay, folks. Sometimes there's some technical issues and we just can't, we got to work around it. My nomination for the 2022 Instructor of the Year would have been one of our amazing instructors that have been crushing it this year. But knowing that I can't actually nominate one of my own guys, I therefore nominate Liam Duggan. When it comes to instructing, I have a high standard, and frankly, it takes a lot to impress me. I attended Liam's presentation at the 2022 Force Science Conference and was blown away by his instructor prowess. Liam discussed complex scientific research, but did so in a way that was easily understood. He artfully used visuals to convey his message without overwhelming the audience with slides of lengthy text. Afterwards, he was approachable and made sure to answer questions from the students. In my conversations with Liam, it is clear that he cares deeply about his officers and his students.
Wow.
So that was the nomination that we received, and I think this is the other video here. Liam has been an extremely valuable member of the Caliber Press instructional team for many years. The announcement that he has been named the 2022 ILET Instructor of the Year fills us with pride and a sense of gratitude for having the opportunity to work with him. Liam embodies the core characteristics that make a truly world-class instructor. He has always remained a learner who continuously seeks new and deeper understandings of the challenging complexities of working in and surviving law enforcement, as an officer, as a leader, and as a human being. His tenacious dedication to his students is inspiring, and his drive to ensure that they're consistently provided with the most current, well-researched information continues to contribute immeasurably to enhancing their professional effectiveness and personal safety. It is an honor to call Liam a colleague, a friend, and now, Instructor of the Year. On behalf of everyone at Caliber Press, heartfelt congratulations on an honor well-deserved.
Wow. That's ridiculous. I'm a kid playing at the grown-ups table in this world in general. So I'm not even sure what to say with words from giants like that. And yeah.
Well, we're not done yet. I got one more for you. Obviously you've worked with Caliber Press for a long time. You've worked with the team at Force Science for a long time. I reached out to Bill Lewinsky. Bill's in California right now, and he's tied up. But he made a suggestion for me for somebody to come in and say a few words. So I'd like to welcome somebody to the chat to share their thoughts and just give you a congratulations. This is Joshua Legault, Senior Commander for the St. Paul, Minnesota Police Department.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. I am so pleased to get to join this live webcast to agree with and endorse the nomination and decision to honor Liam as Instructor of the Year. He and I are peers and partners. We shared time on the training mat and in the classroom. Our time together came when I was already in service in St. Paul, and he joined us after leaving another agency. He suffered through the instructions that I provided in application of force, firearms, interpersonal communications, and conflict resolution. As a young officer, I attended the street survival seminar as it existed, and I marveled at the instructors and the people on stage, but I didn't know them. I just knew what they said. Later on, I joined Force Science at its very beginnings, traveling with Dr. Bill Lewinsky and making presentations nationally and in the nation of Canada on perception, cognition, and decision-making. Liam and I share a passion for that, and he then joined the ranks of Force Science as an instructor, and it meant more to me then because I knew him. He wasn't just someone that appeared to make a presentation. Liam is humble, and he's kind, and he's thoughtful. He understands the way that it's necessary to adjust procedural application of force to adapt it to the situation at hand adapt it to the capabilities of the officer, and truly to take into account the perception, cognition, and decision-making of the person against whom we may be applying force. He has such a 360-degree view of the analysis. He sees everyone involved as a person and no one as an object. I'm so grateful to have had an opportunity to work directly with him as a peer, as an instructor, and now we consult on a regular basis discussing our times here in the state of Minnesota and nationally. But I'm even more grateful to be considered his friend. So from the Western District Outpost to the St. Paul Police Department, Liam, congratulations. Well deserved. And I look forward to seeing you sometime again very soon.
Wow. Josh, I know where you live and work, so this is not over, my friend. Yeah. Wow. I'm not sure who to be mad at for this sandbag here, but Josh, words from you, my friend. It is for this panel and anyone watching this, Josh Legault is a tremendous human being, first of all, and a ridiculous, massive level of knowledge and skill and care and concern for this profession. So for you to say, sir, anything like you did, I don't even have anything to say. So Josh, thank you, my friend, and Adam and this panel here and anyone else involved in this. Like I said, I talk often, you stand on the shoulders of giants when you do this sort of work. And the only reason any one of us ever knows anything is because someone was willing to share it. And that is really the reason I even exist. If I have anything of value to this profession, is because people like Josh and others have been willing to invest. So I don't have anything intelligent to say except thank you.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you, my friend, very much. I really appreciate that. And I will find you.
Yes. Well, you know where I'm at work.
Yeah, I miss my friends there. So
that's right. Well, I'll extend your well wishes to them.
Thank you, sir, very much. I appreciate it.
Be well.
Yeah, let's get on with the conversation. This is massively uncomfortable for me. Let's just move on with looking at the future. So
Adam, you're on mute, sir.
Sorry. Josh, you are welcome to stick around and hang out for the conversation, brother. You're more than qualified.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
And there is one other thing, just a housekeeping point. Up here in Canada, our weather likes to have fun with us. And so my internet is cutting in and out, but this live stream stays live. So if at any point you just see me freeze and not go, John knows what to do. He's played this game before, and he'll take over for me. Okay, with that being said, I do have one more announcement that I would like to make. And we're doing something new here at ILET Network. And this is something that has been in conversation for a little while. And we decided that even though we do an Instructor of the Year, that there are many, many deserving folks in the world that show leadership in many different ways. And we have a lot of guys. We have a chief here. We have a commander. We have a former commander. Leadership is not about stars and stripes. It's not about what you wear on your collar. It's about action. And we have a new recognition. There's an inaugural recognition that we're starting this year, and it's called the Leadership Through Action Award. And we have an initial recipient, and I have a video queued up for everybody because it's going to take a couple minutes, and we can just pre-show this and go from there. Let's see if I can do this. Albert Schweitzer once said that the three best ways of leading people are by example, and by example. Surveys, studies, and research repeatedly tell us that role modeling is one of the most powerful means of influence. This is why many of us become confused when we see endless examples of poor role modeling in the most key leadership positions. The ILET Network Leadership Through Action Award was uniquely created to recognize that leader who acts out and follows through on their commitment to others with their actions. This quality is exemplified in the inaugural winner of the Leadership Through Action Award, Mr. Graham Tinius. Graham is an 18-year law enforcement veteran currently in Sandy City, Utah. Those who know him would tell you that Graham was born to serve. On the job, Graham has displayed his leadership qualities while servicing as a field training officer and patrolling the vast parklands of Sandy City. Graham is also deeply involved in the not-for-profit training organization, the National Association of Field Training Officers. With NAFTO, Graham works to bring affordable, contemporary, and necessary training to FTOs across the country. While any of that might be enough to award Graham this recognition on its own, it is his passion and call to serve others that has earned him this award. Flashback to December 2021. Graham was watching his news feed along with millions of others when he learned about the horrible damage tornadoes had caused in Kentucky. Unlike many of us, Graham answered the call to help. He reached out to his local FOP and was linked up with Utah's local disaster area response team. Just hours later, Graham was on the road to Kentucky, where he served in a variety of different ways. Prior to these tornadoes, Graham had no idea that FOP DART even existed. Leaving Kentucky, he said that he'd never forget about them. Graham did not forget about them. Graham's experience fueled a deeper passion for serving others. In January of 2022, the Boulder County, Colorado wildfires stirred Graham to action once again. He drove out to meet FOP DART in Broomfield, Colorado, and in the This last year, Graham had the honor to speak at the Emerson Hour during the ILET conference, a unique and special night where instructors share some of their deepest beliefs with one another. During his presentation, Graham shared some of what he had learned during his time in Kentucky and Colorado, and how he felt a fair amount of imposter syndrome. Graham was overwhelmed with how much work needs to be done at disasters like these, and how he starving people. If you feel overwhelmed and defeated because you can't feed them all, just feed one. But this award is specifically about leading through action and role modeling. In October 2022, Hurricane Ian tore through Florida. Graham chose to role model his dedication to service by taking both of his teenage sons to Fort Myers to help the people of Florida. He and his boys fed over 1,000 people there and helped secure the homes of about 50 local police officers who were assigned to work nearly 24-hour shifts. Like all true leaders, Graham can only role model the character he wants his sons to mirror and hope they learn from it. As Graham puts it, he hopes that they learn the true selfless work may not come with a paycheck, prize, or recognition, but with a reward that is endless and everlasting. Leaders don't always get the chance to measure their impact. One day, Graham was on the road teaching. He happened to be presenting at a large conference, taking the stage behind the great Gordon Graham. In a text message from his oldest son, Graham shares that he is a little nervous. His son replied with encouragement and told his dad, "You always know the right thing to say. You've got this." And Graham, I can't think of a better measure of an impact that a leader has than what you've shown over the last couple of years, brother. And sorry, I'm getting a little choked up. What you do and what you've done is inspiring to me. So I want to thank you for that. And so I don't have to talk. Here's a video that Paul put together for you.
Hi everyone, Paul Hasselberger from the National Association of Field Training Officers. And on behalf of NAFTO and the Executive Board, I want to congratulate Graham Tinius on receiving the inaugural Leadership Through Action Award. Having worked with Graham, with NAFTO for the last few years, no one quite embodies the idea of working versus talking quite like Graham. And we're lucky to have him a part of our board, and NAFTO has certainly benefited from his hard work. So congratulations, Graham, you deserve it.
That's not all, because of course I always go above and beyond. Graham, there's somebody here who I would like to bring up to the table as well. This is Captain Corey Hess from Sandy City Police Department.
Surprise! I feel like I've been virtually creepily sitting in behind your forest there, Graham, waiting to say a few words to you. But on behalf of Chief Severson, who wanted to be here but had a conflicting appointment, we want to say thank you for all that you do for us here in your home agency. I met Graham originally through NAFTO when I was the sergeant over our FTO program, and we went to a training that he put on. The lieutenant and I, lieutenant then started trying to target Graham to come to us, and we finally got him. So well-deserved, Graham. We appreciate the example that you show for us. We do have a lot of younger officers in our city as well. Then it's good to see a good role model in one of their own. So congratulations, way to be the inaugural winner of the Leadership Through Action Award. Congrats.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, Corey, for joining us, my friend.
Thank you.
All right. Wow. So Graham, congratulations, brother. The write up and the video, just so you're aware, that was all written by Dan Green. And so I don't you don't have to say anything. I understand it's probably a bunch you weren't expecting it, but I appreciate you being here, dude, and just excited to be able to honor you with that recognition.
That would be the Dan Green who pretended to have no idea where to find this live stream today because he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to watch it or not.
Yeah,
I'm starting to feel like we may not be talking about the future of policing and current events today at all. So I have like buckets of notes in front of me. And you can put me on the spot for training any day, but when you put me on the spot for my family, now I have tear-stained notes in front of me. So some of the conversation later today is going to be a little bit garbled, but I don't know what to say. I'm extremely humbled. Dan and Paul are usually the face of our organization, and I am generally most comfortable behind the scenes, and I feel like I put a lot of work in making things come together from a background position. And so just hearing everyone's comments was unbelievably kind. I'm very honored. I'm extremely humbled. I'm still hoping we get to talk a little bit about the future of policing today, but there's
we got lots of time. Don't you worry. Don't you worry.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone.
Yeah, no, absolutely, brother. And so you guys are gonna get the hardware. Well, I mean, I'll probably just bring it down to you for like ILET or something would probably make the most sense, but we'll figure it out. Okay, so that's it for the housekeeping. Sorry, I had to. It's been an interesting couple days trying to coordinate all of this especially with the guest speaker. So it's been fun. But let's jump into this conversation about the future of policing. This is one of those things that is critically important, that we not just talk about what we can do today to impact our profession, but what do we see coming down the road, and how can we put ourselves in an advantageous position to be able to make the correct moves when they become available to us. And so I guess I want to open up the floor to everybody here on the panel, but I also want to open up the floor to everybody in the chat. If you're live joining us in the chat and you have questions for anybody on the panel, please put them in the chat. We're here to answer your questions as well. It's not just about us having a conversation. If you have any questions, comments, or thoughts on policing, please feel free to ask them in the chat. But I'm going to open up the floor. Anybody here on the live panel that wants to kick things off, and any initial thoughts when it comes to the idea of the future of policing?
Yeah, I'm just going to build on what you just said, Adam. So you said, how do we see? That's a real interesting question, isn't it? How do you see something in complexity, complex systems that produce things that literally are unpredictable? How do you see, we'll go to Rumsfeld, how do you see the unknown unknowns? We're dealing with something that is, as policing evolves now, our interconnectedness, all the stuff, all the ripple effects, all the stuff, and not passing judgment on anything. Just the very nature of what policing is and what it might be 3, 4 years, 5 years from now, all this interconnection, all this so-called responsibility. How do we see? How do we perceive? How do we create better seers, better perceivers, whatever term you want to give to them? And the argument on that is, at least in where I spend a lot of time, is how do we change our mental models and thinking? But I think this is one of the key things we're dealing with now. Is there's an old saying in the military that we have a tendency to fight the last war. And we can't take the same things or the same way of thinking and say, hey, we're going to solve everything that we did with it and sort of shoehorn it into that problem. I think one of the biggest things that we're struggling with right now is the changing of how we look at the world. And it's not A or B. It's not saying throw out the old way. It's saying you need people that are amazingly adept. And so I just want to throw that to the rest of the panel about your thoughts on those ideas and what you think.
Graham, you're muted if you're interested.
Yeah. So when John says, how do we predict the unpredictable? Gordon Graham recently gave a presentation where he talked about somebody's black swan is somebody else's gray rhino, right? Like a black swan being something that comes out of nowhere that you couldn't possibly see coming. When across the country, there's so many different police departments, there's so many different officers, municipalities, counties that may have already experienced something like this, which is, you know, the gray rhino, when you see it coming and you're standing there and it's continuing to charge at you and you're going, I don't really know what to do, but it's just continuing to charge at you because it was completely predictable if we had had the correct information at the time. And so my lead into this is the continuation of information sharing. And instead of training organizations playing poker and holding cards close to their hand, interacting with each other, sharing information with each other, networking with each other, and promoting each other so that people's experiences are getting out there. And police departments, instead of trying to mitigate liability, which is obviously important, but talking about true learning lessons from negative experiences. If we make a mistake, or if we made a mistake of the heart instead of the mind, you know, but actually talking about the learning lessons behind there and sharing that so that there are no more black swans. It is just gray rhinos that we can hopefully see coming. And clearly that's a small portion, I think, of what John is talking about. There's many different aspects to law enforcement, but I think one thing that we need to do better is talking about our learning lessons and sharing information with each other as much as we possibly can.
So if I may jump in, I appreciate being added to the panel in this way. Being adept in adaptability, I think, is a cornerstone. I agree with Dr. Black entirely. There's very little, I think, that is new with regard to the enforcement of laws or social mores and expectations, save for Axon, who came up with something so novel and so unique that didn't exist, and yet human beings have been using their hands and tools as those tools evolved over time. But the adaptation of our actions to what's happening right now, I think, is essential. People who are believe they know it all or believe that they have the right answer are, I think, today wonderfully prepared for a world that no longer exists. And in the, you know, considering the concept of teleology, or the study of time, we have our shared past and history and what's happening right now, and then there's a bleeding edge moving into the history that's yet to be realized or written because we haven't yet experienced it. That's a constantly moving target into the future. And when our leaders, and I believe that all police officers are leaders, it's not, I agree 100%, it's not whether you have clusters or bars or stars on your collar. Our rank and file police officer is a leader of the public. The more we can get them to see that, the more they'll perhaps adapt themselves to that mindset. And as leaders, then identifying trends and possibilities. In our profession, I think that there's, to put it simply, there can be a baby dragon running around, and baby dragons may be cute, and you have to slay a baby dragon before it becomes a full-grown dragon, one that runs around the village and burns the crops and wrecks the buildings. That's part of leadership, is identifying those trends, those patterns, and intercepting them in such a way constructively so we can make things go right and stay, instead of paying attention to how things have gone wrong in our midst.
Something that was said both by Graham and Josh, you weighed in on it too, and I think it's very insightful. Graham, you mentioned the idea of, you know, learning by its very nature is more often than not stems from the mistakes that we make. We often don't examine our successes and learn from them. We just sort of accept them. But the mistakes that we make is where really the good learning happens. But to your point, what happens if we aren't allowed to make mistakes? What happens if liability is such a driver of what it is that we are? The short answer is it affects learning. What happens if liability becomes the ultimate driver? And Josh, to your point as well, is this idea of the leading edge of time, so to speak, is it's sort of a great arrogance, isn't it? It's this idea that we know so far out, we can forecast so far out, and there's complete theories on how to do this and everything else. But they also tell you that as good as you are, you ain't going to get it perfectly right. It just ain't going to happen, right? We are always in a state of learning. So here's a question to the listeners as well as to the panel. If we know this, and if you were to go for it, and you were for one moment in time, not to take Josh's theological thing, but for one moment in time, you could design the so-called ideal officer, or you could design the ideal agency that would have these certain characteristics, both at an agency level and at a person level, at an officer level, in order to survive 3 years from now, and not just survive, to thrive, to actually start chipping away at some of these things that might be there. What would they be? What unique things would they possess? What characteristics would you be looking for? What would differentiate an agency of the future in policing? So designing it from a capacity model as compared to a problem model. If we admit that we can't know all the problems, what capacities do you want that aren't there? And I offer that to the chat that Adam's monitoring, to the group as well, and then we can all jump in.
I know, Andy, you were going to jump in a second here talking about kind of that complexity of platforms. And I think when you talk about capacities, right, and Doc, you're exactly right. This profession of ours, I don't even like applying the word profession, because it implies, right, standards and normals and such, which we're moving toward. But the more we're starting to accept and understand that at best, right, every police officer is a human being, and they are human beings on the other side of our contacts and conflicts. The Axon companies build their platforms based off of the understanding of human physiology, right, and how that side of a human works. The main capacity that we are starting to grow toward, which many other domains have figured out, is that you have to start with the understanding of this profession runs on human connections inside the organization, outside the organization, one suspect, witness, victim at a time. It's human connections. And when society is exploding on one side based off of emotions and other things, and agencies are under turmoil, it still comes down to the same darn thing: human connections. How do I build the capacity for my officers to connect with each other, to connect with the people they're dealing with? How do I build in them the capacity to connect with their training, to connect with the platforms that are built for them to try and address situations? And until we acknowledge and accept that that's where everything starts, and move away from the blame game and understand how and why these things happen, we'll miss the mark. We're getting better about it, about understanding the importance of those connections. But in the meantime, if we only believe that processes and platforms are going to be the answer, we'll just continue to repeat the past, which, those who refuse to learn from it are doomed to repeat it. So it's fantastic that companies like Axon and others are helping us build that side of it. It's our job to understand and accept the human fallible side of it, which is, at best, on my greatest day, I'm a human being, and I need to start understanding the importance of those connections. So, and I know, Andy, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah. Thanks, Liam and Doc. Yeah, I'm personally obsessed with how we deal with the unknown. And the way I think about this, just from the human side, I wasn't a tech guy. I was a cop in Charlotte in the instructor network for quite a number of years in use of force, and so I do understand that world. And so Adam and I were talking about this on a podcast, like, when in the States, this, if we think about police officer preparedness, we're on the average giving cops 600 to 700 hours and send them out into field training, and there we cut them loose and there they go. And then in that academy experience, sub 10% of the time is use of force and critical decision-making modeling. And then I go to Germany, where we have a global footprint, as you guys know, and those officers are in school for 3 years before they ever get cut loose. And the product from a police recruit or trainee perspective is completely different. And in most in the critical decision making modeling, I'm not going to say we're going to change this overnight in the States, or at least, and I'm not super familiar with Canada, Adam, but how do we think about the future of that? What can we give human beings more of? I think all of us would go more DT, more critical decision making, more firearms training, that kind of stuff. That's low hanging fruit. Everybody wants it, but how do we get that resource? So on the human factor side, yeah, I think 100% we could be more prepared. On the platform side, this is one that, one of the things I love about Rick Smith, our CEO, is he's the real deal. And for those of you who met Rick, you know this about him. He continues to be just like super passionate about figuring this out. And so at Axon on the tech side, how do we think about continuing to create more complexity in the solution, that it does more, it provides better outcome for the agency, but remove more complexity from the officer. So on the human factor side, they're worrying about less and just doing more on the decision-making model. So an example of that could be firearms are way more efficient than a taser today, right? But a lot of the escalation of force modeling that we see is because a taser was ineffective. Why was it ineffective? We missed. We couldn't get through clothing. Probe spread wasn't what we needed to create the NMI, which is neuromuscular incapacitation, as we all know. So how then do we think about tasers in the future? So where it's way more efficient, maybe it works more like a pistol, we're getting more range, so we're giving the officer more time to make decisions or get to cover or provide some distance. And so we're really thinking about that with that primary platform, which is the taser. How do we make it just easier to use, more intuitive? We've been asking officers for over 2 decades to do some trigonometry when they're out with people to get the right probe spread. That's complex. We're asking the officer, in addition to the madness that they're dealing with in split seconds, to problem solve, to use the technology in a very complex way. So we're unpacking that right now. TaserCon would be a good place to go if you really want to be excited about some new conversations. Wink, wink. And then the other side is information, right? We launched RMS, kind of announced that years ago, and our ethos around that was like, hey, we got cops. 2/3 of their day is bookkeeping, admin, report writing, that kind of stuff. How do we pull that away into complex algorithms, AI, and that kind of stuff? So actually policing. Back to your point, Liam, they're interacting more as humans and less robotic. And then is there a world one day the drone outpaces patrol cars to the actual incident and gives more information back to the officer? So, on those unknown problem calls or domestics or whatever, the officer actually is getting fed way more information at the location. So when they get there, they're making different decisions. So those are the things, just kind of reducing the complexity the officer has to deal with and giving them more information so they can make better decisions and candidly give them more time as well. So those are all things we're thinking about now, trying to kind of unpack that.
Andy, if I can, you said, because you're hitting on such a tremendously important thing, and this would really be for non-law enforcement, any of our public out there. When you look at human evolution, you're talking a run of a couple thousand years for a measurable increase in the adaptive capacity of a human brain to do more. A couple thousand years when we start looking at kind of like cellular development, and yet we are asking our officers to adaptively change and grow in their decision making in the space of a 4-month FTO period or even a 25-year career. Biologically, that's not possible. It literally can't happen. And so things like you're talking about, and I use the term task saturation. So if the platforms can more intelligently do some of the work and take some of that task saturation off of the individual person so that they can refocus their cognition in another area, now we start to find maybe I hesitate to say, but a sweet spot, because no matter who my coppers coming on are, they're not going to be different human beings than they were 7 years ago or 20 years ago. I have the clay I have to work with, and they're tremendous people that want to do a hard job. But starting to find a balance of that task saturation and limiting some of that so that they can do what their brains are able to do, man, we're going to find ourselves in a better spot. So Andy, thanks for saying that. You're right on spot there.
So Liam, building on you and Andy, and so of course we're speaking with Adam. If someone doesn't throw something contrary in, he just isn't comfortable with the conversation. We got to do something to like, oh yeah, now it's a soap opera. But but what I'm getting at is this. And again, I apologize, guys. I'm passionate about this because this is literally what I live in all the time. And so here's an interesting thing. Does more information actually make better decisions? There's actually research that shows, in fact, it doesn't. To Liam's point, we have a saturation point, right? And so back to a thinking model, and Adam, if you want to throw that graphic up, now would be a good time. This is just a thinking model as an example. I'm not saying it, I'm not advocating for or against, but what I think is interesting about this is look at what is at the bottom. Thinking drives the mental models. The mental models drives learning. Individual learning drives the organization. The organization, from its learning, says, hey, I need these missions, effective systems for capacity. And then once we get those organizational capacities, we can keep doing those things that we repeatedly need to do for the customer. And it could be for business, a client. And remember, your biggest customer is your officer, plain and simple. And then after that, we can get to this so-called vision. But how many times do we actually do this in reverse? How many times do we actually start at the top and forget that it all stemmed from changing our thinking? Without the mental models, without that shift in that, Liam, to your point, without adapting to the degree we can and respecting that it is a balance. We are not going to solve these problems. Our goal is to get better at dealing with them. Where's that sweet spot about enough relevant information, the expert view, quiet eye, and everything else, because that's what the expert knows to do. They know where to look and when to look and how long to look. And this could be an expert at the chief level, at Liam's level. Or it could be an expert that's just out of the academy, but they're not an expert yet. Well, why? Because of this. It's a thinking problem. And so to me, these type of things and dealing with these type of things, it's actually almost a change in language. We begin to focus on balance and dynamics and how we manage these things. But yet most of the language we talk about is solving, avoiding error. The earlier point made is if we avoid error all the time, to Graham's point, that means what? You're never allowed to make a mistake? Then how are you learning? So again, back to the panel and back to the group out there, we're discussing some of the characteristics of this future ideal agency and a future ideal individual. I'm really interested to hear, because this is what I deal with, build on this. Keep going. What were the characteristics of these things? What do we need to shift and change? Because up in my upper left corner with Adam up there, I got to tell you, ILET is uniquely designed and positioned to be able to get some of these messages out and to have both a bottom-up approach. We can do little stuff to fix thinking and to help thinking and to add to it, and also to get it in front of higher up and top-down approaches. I mean, hell, we got chiefs and in my world, a commander wearing a full bull on his collar. So it's all good. But again, I ramble, keep going.
Doc, I will, and then I'm going to be quiet here because I want to hear what people have to say. The terms that come in when you're talking about, whether you're talking about leadership or technology or just copying, it's risk competence versus risk averse, right? I need my officers, my leaders to be risk competent. I can't have them being risk averse. Technology companies develop a competency in risk. There's a risk with electrical conducting weapons. It is what it is, right? But they're competent in that. They're not averted to it. And that really, to me, is the exclamation point there. I need my people, my technology to be risk competent. I need my leaders and everyone else to run away from being risk adverse, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Doc, I'll say I'm aligned on the information 100%. When I started in this role, I really got to know a peer of mine then who I actually roll up to now, a guy named Pat Madden, who's a Force Recon Marine. And when Pat and I started hanging out and getting to know each other a lot better, he's like, man, thanks for what you did in Charlotte as a police officer. And I just can't even imagine. I'm like, Pat, my dad's a Marine. I grew up around a military family. I understand those risks. And I said, Pat, what are you talking about? You guys are, Pat was in war and combat, did all these crazy things. I'm like, it's not even the same world. Thanks for what you guys did. And he's like, dude, you don't understand. I had intel. Everywhere I went, I knew who my enemy was, and I knew likely what my risk was. He said, every time you guys stop a car, you go through a door, you go to a domestic, you go to a disturbance, you have zero information. So when I'm talking about, more information, I'm talking about information that creates time. The information that leads into what the officer is going to be involved with. That's why we continue to try to unpack this drone stuff, because these things are going to be flying off police cars, all kind of stuff. That's our vision for it. We have to make it safe for the communities to understand this is a life-saving tool, because if we don't create urgency when we're out with people, we save more lives. We see that all the time with officers. We have a huge problem with that in the States. Candidly, I think it's back to the limited resource and training we give officers to leave an academy in the first place. But point of that is, it's like more information, but more, adding that to more time as well is kind of how we're thinking about that, if that makes sense.
No, Andy, that's a 10, man. Think about this. And again, the simplest things, there's an old maxim of Murphy, never confuse easy with simple, and the simple way is always mind, right? But putting that aside for a minute, the thing about here is how often do we say, hey, you know what, we're going to teach you cover, and we're going to teach you this, and we're going to teach you slowing down. Well, why do we do that? Go one step upstream to what you just said. Those are all physical ways of giving us time. But time for what? Time to make decisions. Graham, you were talking about gray rhinos, right? Well, if we could recognize them earlier. Josh, you've already talked about slaying baby dragons. Aren't those all time problems? Aren't they all recognition of earlier detection? Knowing the relevant information. Go back to Klein stuff. Isn't the schema of the decision maker, the inteller, or anything else, all the stuff I worked, it's knowing what that means when you see it before the other guy does? Wow, now how cool would that be? We're not only creating time by physical properties, we're creating time by intelligence. So you're good, man. That's perfect.
Well, I don't know perfect, but we're trying to figure it out, and we can only do it with guys like you to help us help guide us, that we're connecting tech and the complexity of tech to human factors. That balance has to be not perfect. It has to be right. So that's why we continue to try to unpack this.
I think there's something interesting with that too. I mean, we talk about technologies that are in the future that are going to give us time. There's stuff that exists right now that has been around for a long time that we just don't utilize and optimize. I think, for example, we're building out a tactical optics program. Imagine the benefit of having a low power variable optic on a rifle for an officer, right? Imagine them having a pair of binoculars in a car, so that when they're rolling up to a scene, they can stop and do a quick recce of that scene, so they're not rolling into an ambush. Binoculars have been around forever, right? For a long time. But how many pairs of binoculars do you see in police vehicles around the United States, around the world, right? It's an immensely useful tool, right? I don't know one, like for myself, when I was in the infantry, when we went through our dismounted and platoon commander course, every single one of us had optics on us in some way, shape, or form, so that we could do a battlefield assessment when we needed to. Some of those things that we utilize, I think they're available to us, but we don't share that information readily enough with our officers, or people they're like, well, you have this conversation. This is the one we're having right now with this optics program, right? Agencies are like, well, why would we put scope or glass on our rifles? That just means our officers can shoot people more easily. It's like, or what if that optic now allows them to properly identify whether or not that's a cell phone or a gun, and maybe they don't even have to take the shot. Maybe they have that rifle up and they actually can see 2 blocks away that there is an ambush laid out for them, or that there are other things. When a unit's coming down the other side of the street, they can call them off and say, hey, there's danger here. Don't move. Don't roll into that house. there's things that we have available to us right now that don't need any new technology that we're not taking advantage of. And so there's so many aspects to this, but it's not just what's coming down the pipe, it's understanding what we have available to us today.
Or maybe their FTO culturally socialized them into believing that they weren't allowed to use that, because the first time that they pulled out their binoculars, their FTO, who has been on for 22 years, says, no, you're not always going to have binoculars, so you have to prove to me that you can do this without it. And then they pulled out their phone to open up their GPS system to navigate there faster. And their FTO said, no, you're not always going to have GPS because cell phone towers go down. So you have to prove to me that you can get there by using this map from 1978 that's in a clipboard behind the passenger side headboard, right? And obviously most of my personal experiences draw from FTO. That's my bread and butter. It's everything that I live, breathe, and eat in life. But it's such a frustration point to me to hear the other panelists talk about the technology that is forthcoming, the technology that exists today. What can we do to reduce the complexity that's placed on the officer? Well, like you said, Adam, we already have those tools, but frequently in our training, in our in-house training, be it in the academy or in FTO or anything else, we're not allowed to use the tools that we know that exist. And there seems to be this reluctance to accept younger generations of officers and the things that they know how to do and the things that they just like innate abilities that they've been raised with. You know, the first millennials and zennials that came into law enforcement that had cell phones, and they're using it as research tools. They're using it as navigational guides. They're using it to communicate with each other. And you have officers in a leadership capacity or in a formal training capacity who are unfamiliar with that. And so they put their foot down and say, no, you can't use that. You have to use this old school way of thinking. Once you're on your own, if you want to figure out how to do that, that's fine. Well, now we get back into liability. Why are we telling someone that they're not allowed to use a tool or program or opportunity while they have a safety net standing next to them? But once we cut them loose, we're going to give them independence to just kind of figure out different ways of doing things. So I wish that there was an acknowledgement that the tools that we have now are extremely valuable. I have a set of binoculars in my center console next to me. I was like chuckling to myself when you said that. I happen to be a park police officer, right? So I work out in these large mountainous areas in Utah. And so I was able to get binoculars because I justified it that way. But I use them more when I'm down in the residential parts than anywhere else, right? That is a simple device that makes our job easier, makes us safer. But as you were speaking, I just kept thinking to myself, man, I bet you if a trainee pulled that out, an FTO somewhere in this country would slap it out of their hands and say, no, do it the old fashioned way first. You can do that later.
And I know John wants to jump in here. But here's a great example. Here's one of the optics that were given away that Vortex sent us. This is a monocular. This is the new version of the one that I had on my kit when I was in the military. It's small. And it's not cumbersome, and it could be deemed as tactical for those of us if that's the option you want to do. But it's something like this that can be a game changer on the battlefield, but definitely for officers. And Graham, you said something really interesting there about the new generations. And before I kick it over to John, I'm a huge fan of Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm not just do the training stuff for my end. I have the business side of me that also likes gaining information. And Gary Vaynerchuk said something about how old generations seem to think that the new generations have no idea how to communicate, right? Oh, they have no idea how to communicate. They're on their phones all day. He has very interesting insight on that. He says the new generations are 10 times the communicators that anybody of our generations are. If you think about it, when we want to talk to somebody, what do? We pick up the phone or we call or we wait to see them in person. These new officers that are coming into academy are having conversations with 50 different people a day from 50 different places on 6 different platforms. They're much more effective communicators than we ever were. They're just utilizing a technology that we're not comfortable with. And we have to shift our mindset when it comes to that. It's not, we can't live in the past. We have to look to the future. And if we keep restricting our officers from doing what they're capable of doing when they're coming in, we're putting ourselves and them at a detriment from the jump. So anyway, John, I'll let you jump in, brother.
No, all good stuff. And I mean, I'm just joking because what Graham is, I just finished reconstructing a capital murder scene, and this is what I carry with me. And, you know, I can know the distance, exactly what I'm looking at, 4,500 meters away, plus or minus a couple yards, and the azimuth to it. And my dispatch then would know where I'm located at. So that's a pretty good thing, isn't it? And now, to your point, though, Graham, results-oriented work environment is a common term for it. But again, and I dealt with the same thing. I ran hostage negotiations for a period of time, and we had a lot of the younger guys come in, speaking to what Adam was speaking in, and the language that they used and the way that they communicated was different. It was just a different language and a different communication. And what we had to recognize our own shortcomings, is we were not nuanced in the dialect of that language. Just because it was English, if we didn't have the right emojis or the right memes or anything else, they didn't have any meaning to us. But these guys were communicating in ways that were amazingly subtle and nuanced. And it's like, what in the hell? And it's like, quick, go get my interpreter. You know, the young guy that knows how to freaking use the phone, and bring him over to the old guy over here. But the thing is, we have to respect that. Now, to your point, though, and I am curious about back to the future learning organizations, or the future organizations from now, or the individual tendencies. You're describing a process-focused adherence. You do it this way, and these steps, very linear, very that, right? In contrast, with all the different ways we interact with the world now, the training, as it shifts, you're beginning to see what? Hey, here's all the different ways you can get from point A to point B. And you're going to probably show me ones I haven't even thought about. As long as you can get there, quote, legal, ethical, moral, and everything else, whatever your constraints are, my bigger concern is you show me how you can adapt and think your way to get to the other end of this. To what the organization does is put the standard constraints on the desired outcome. That's what they do. But we don't have to put the restrictions and the constraints of so narrow and brittle on the process and say that the process is actually the measurement of success or the measurement of what it is that you're trying to train. And this is something you're seeing a shift in business. You're seeing a shift in the training circles. But I think law enforcement is spending some time to really spending some time to sort of catch up with it. So just a couple cents. So Liam, I see you teed Josh up there.
Yeah, just maybe kind of the exclamation on this part of the discussion for me is in Minnesota, we've had it this way. Just, you know, anytime I speak to people, I like to say I'm a Minnesota cop. You're welcome. For the last couple of years of just hell in this profession, even though it's been bubbling, right? But the kick when you talk to coppers around the country, especially as legislative bodies have been changing laws, is so I happen to be at a rank that I'm at, and because of the rank I'm at, my white New Balance tennis shoes arrived earlier this week that I now wear because, right, I'm an old guy and I look at the world like that. But my newest recruits, the ones that have started in the last couple of years, they just look at today as like a Tuesday or a Friday. They don't have a historical legacy memory of the way policing used to be before. And Andy, don't lose your mind here, but before we electrocuted people, right? Back in the day, no one even conceived of that possibility. Now we understand that these less lethal platforms have amazing benefits and possibilities. The newest recruits that we're bringing on have these different ways of looking at things that old guys like me or us or might go, how is that even possible? But there's a tremendous amount to be learned from the way their minds work, albeit differently than mine, just like technology grows. And Josh, because your agency, you're bringing on recruit academies of 10, 20, 30, 40 at a time, if we're lucky these days. I'm curious as to what your thought is on what those benefits are that our newer officers are bringing to the table that are going to push us to the future in ways that might change or alter how we think and look at things like FTO and technologies.
Mm-hmm. Well, I stand by the idea. It says it in Ecclesiastes that there's nothing new under the sun. When we were all new in this profession or in the military profession, we brought our skills and talents with us as freshly minted members of that group. And it seems to me that in 1996, when I began, there was the elder officers with 26 years in grade at that time, where I sit today now, would look back at us and say, "I don't know, kid, you're not gonna like this after a while," and the world's gone to hell in a handbasket. And I try to combat that with my officers in the span of control, to not have a negative and caustic impact on our freshly minted police officers. Another role that I had as a commander in the department was watch commander, working overnights and approving arrests and probable cause, allowing for search warrants to take place after hours, essentially being the eyes and ears for the chief of police while they comfortably rested under the blanket of protection I provided, until I called them because I needed permission to do something. One day an officer comes in and they're briefing me on the case, and he's looking at his phone. And in doing so, I was perplexed. We've had so many jumps in technology. We had MDTs when I began, and then those went actually down for 3 years, which meant I really had to know how to get around. And then MDTs became the MDCs, and there's been an evolution over time. So after about the third day of being watch commander, I asked a recruit that I knew from teaching in the academy, I'm like, "Do you have CAD on your phone?" And so just a naive question. He said, "Well, no, I took a picture of my screen." So he had all of the details he needed to brief the watch commander about the incident in a picture. And frankly, that never would have occurred to me because I was not in that environment. The answer, I think, to your very honest and probing question, Liam, is, how do we find value in that which they bring? And one of the viewers, Dan, posted something, I think that's 100% correct, the assessment of open-mindedness. And yet I've been in the car subject to FTO in another time where I was trying to do something, groping for meaning instead of going by a rote lesson. And the FTO chastising and challenging me, "Well, we don't do it that way." "Well, no, you're going to do it this way," which was their way. And I see that as inviting unnecessary conflict. So that I think is hand in hand with open-mindedness, because when we invite conflict with other people, I think that is somewhat closed-minded. I think it's because we would like our way, and to force people, again, the use of force is everything. It's human. It's not just policing. Force them into our pattern of thoughts and behaviors, as opposed to just seeing how it may evolve. There's nothing passive or weak about that. Really, it comes from a heart at peace instead of having a heart at war with the methods and manners of other people. And don't we see that just in basic human interactions? People with differing faith backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, inviting conflict from one another. These are human problems that we are solving in law enforcement, making apprehensions with tools and tactics and procedures, adapting those procedures to the individual officers. Liam and I taught on the mat together as use of force instructors, and we had this concept of the itty-bitty officer in our mind. And there were times where I would teach takedown techniques to our shorter officers, because I'm rather tall. I'm just over 6'2", and I would teach from my knees to adapt the process to their height and stature. Your best uke in any training is someone of your same size, same weight, same arm length, same everything. And that doesn't happen on the street. So how we give them the experience is important, and that adaptation is important, but all the while without inviting unnecessary conflict. And the greatest patience a person can demonstrate comes from a position of strength and not passivity. And then, to an earlier comment's point, to find the time. If we paused, when I was new, we would pause and look at a map, and that took time. And maybe, just maybe, that gave us pause to think, pause to consider, pause to take a breath. Because if you knew where you were going, and you knew and believed you knew where the address was, you go whipping around a corner and your tires are screeching and your attentional focus is going from internal and narrow to external and broad and back again and zooming around. That takes up that intellectual brain space where decisions are made. So, I mean, it's incredibly complex, and I do that. I go off into tangents. I appreciate your patience. I think that concept of not inviting conflict in the squad car, demonstrating unconditional respect. I'm channeling a friend of mine, retired Major Chip Huth from Kansas City. He works very closely today with the Arbinger Institute, wrote a book about policing with his supervisor at the time. He's got a great TED Talk if you'd ever want to take a look at it. By having respect in the squad car with our partners, respect in the squad room, by not inviting unnecessary conflict, that takes the pressure off, which I think will open up brain space for thinking, and then good tactical decision making in the moment. So we've got to leverage that in our officers. We have to recognize that they're just as eager and just as young and just as excited as we were, and to let them grow where they've been planted.
Josh, you brought up a lot of great points there. One, if anybody's watching the ILET Summit today, Chip, we have a 1-hour session from Chip on Arbinger's triangle that they use for leadership, and so he has a full. We just released a full presentation on it, exclusive just for ILET.
It's life-changing.
So
Really
let me know after. I'll send it to you after, so you have access to it. But no, that's a great point. Anybody else?
Well, it's interesting because, and again, Josh, what you just brought up, there's a subtlety to inviting conflict, isn't there? I mean, think about it. If we're both in the same car and we're having a discussion that we don't agree with each other, the fact is, if both of our, we'll call it hearts and minds, are in the place of learning, what can I learn from you? That's mutual respect. It is a conflict, but it isn't about defensiveness. It isn't about that. We're still thinking and we're still learning. And so the thing is, conflict by its very nature, setting up tension, dynamic tension, and I'll defer to Graham. If you think about it, we set up dynamic tension, and when things aren't challenging enough, we should challenge the student even more, to include ourselves. We're our own best student. Think metacognition. And so I think it's a very interesting comment, because I would offer that too many times we invite unnecessary conflict with a focus on defensiveness, which is pride and other stuff. In contrast, why can't we learn to enjoy being uncertain? Why can't we learn to enjoy? Holy crap, I never really thought of it that way. Back to your map. Think about the times, and to Graham's point, quick, pull out the clipboard. Where's my Thomas guide? So yeah, and everybody's like, well, what the hell's a Thomas guide, right? And so we sit there and we start putting X's because we got to do containment, right? But by slowing down, someone turns to you like, well, why do you think he's going to go that way? Well, that's a really damn good question. I never really thought about it. What happens if he's over there? What happens if there's 5 people? What happens if he switched cars? The very nature of thinking through the problem before we arrive at a conclusion, which is kind of referred to the area ideal, which is sense making, all that precedes the decision, getting the richest understanding. It's amazingly powerful because it gives us options that were never there before. But Josh, to your point, it requires that we stop this defensive bullshit and pulling out conflict just for conflict's sake to win the argument. It is not A or B. It very rarely is in complexity. It's normally a blend of A, B, and something you don't even see, and we'll call that C ad infinitum. But again, I think it's a very interesting comment, so thank you.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that that Chip is going to be presenting to the group. He is a wonderful, wonderful man and a great leader, a friend of mine. So generous, in fact, that when he flies through MSP, he'll send me a text and he'll leave the concourse to come to baggage claim to meet me for coffee and then go back on. I mean, that's how generous in spirit he is. That's how much he cares and is in the moment. Doc, you're talking about collusion, and without making this a PSA for the Arbinger Institute, fantastic. ARBINGER. Their books are incredible, life-changing works, and we collude with others. And when you say that these disagreements are subtle, you are 100% correct. It does not have to be aggressive. It doesn't have to be brutal. We invite one another to conflict. Even with what you said, Doc, if my heart was at war and not at peace, I could have taken offense to what you said. Now, you didn't say anything. I mean, you didn't, but it's almost like, and what I'll say for our classes on interpersonal communication or conflict resolution in the academy, I get a chance to speak to my peers. I do it on the side. I do it in an organization's way. We have a new chief in our department. He asked me in a meeting, what would you like to do? And I said, are you asking me to wave a magic wand? And he said, yes. And so I waved it. And it has to do with leadership development on this very topic at our highest levels, to treat our officers and see them as humans, not manage them like objects. And with a heart at peace, I don't take offense. And so when I try to relay this to the officers, I discuss the game Hungry, Hungry Hippos. You slap the paddle and the mouth goes out to gather marbles. They're trying to capture marbles. It's kind of like taking offense. People take offense when their heart's at war, but they're willing to let things evolve in front of them when their hearts are at peace. So I'm delighted, and thank you for the opportunity to watch Chip. Every time I listen to him, I learn something new.
I also find that people are, when you talk about conflict, I'm going to say argue or debate, right? I think that people are arguing to win and not to learn, right? And winning doesn't mean you're right. It just means that you won the argument. And if you get to the point where you insult the other person so badly that they retreat, you've won. And that's clearly not, like, that shouldn't be the objective. Anyone that knows me personally, I apologize. I love to argue, and I love it so much that my personal joke is sometimes I'll get bored halfway through and switch sides just to kind of mix things up, and just come at you from the same side that you were just coming at, and see if you can reverse roles as well. My very good friend and mentor, Dan Green, I got to work for him for a very long time. We are on opposite ends of the spectrum. Religiously, we're on opposite ends of the spectrum. In many things, we're on opposite ends of the spectrum. Dan is one of the few people in the world that we can talk about extremely heavy, complicated, deeply passionate positions without agreeing and without ever becoming upset with each other, without ever becoming resentful, and just taking a little bit away from each other. That's obviously somewhat of an extreme, but even within, if we bring this back to policing, like if we have a supervisor who has an officer who has a contradictory opinion, we should be able to hear each other out. We should at least be able to hear those other viewpoints out. If we have peers on a team, we should be able to hear each other out. And sometimes it's good to have conflict, to have an argument, to have a debate, and walk away without a change of opinion. But at least you understand where that other person is coming from. You understand their perspective. Or maybe you just pull one little tiny nugget of appreciation out of that entire conversation. You don't actually change your opinion on the whole thing. Adam, you were talking earlier about how younger generations communicate. And I just had a conversation with someone 2 weeks ago where they said, the younger generations, they can't communicate. They're always on their phones. They are scared of communication. And I put my foot down and I was like, what are you talking about? They are communicating. They're constantly communicating. They're communicating faster and wider and in a bigger net than you ever have and could ever imagine. One of the things that I love about the younger generation and their altruism in law enforcement is their global connection. Through social media, they have friends in other countries. They have friends in Ukraine. They have friends in Iran. So that when these global conflicts are happening, it's a personal level to them because they know someone who is living in that country right now, right? The people who are talking about, well, a firm handshake and look me in the eyes, we don't necessarily have those global connections. The younger generation absolutely does. And I think that makes them like better social caretakers because they don't just care about their immediate community. They care about their country. They care about the globe. They care about people all over the place. I went a little bit too far in my own head here, so I apologize. But I think that we need to appreciate the work and the effort that younger generations put in with that communication. But I think that they can be more averse to conflict because there's a certain anonymity to online communication. So when we are in rooms together, there's a feeling that, well, like I have to win this conversation, not I have to get something out of this conversation, or we just need to have this conversation and that's it. Like we just need to have this conversation, like if you messed up at work, I need to talk to you about that. I'm not angry at you. I'm not upset. this isn't, I'm not going to hold this over your head, but we need to have this conversation. But learning how to handle conflict and still shake hands and be friends at the end of the day, I think is super important. We need to bring debate clubs back to high schools, I think, is where I'm going with this.
I got to tell you, Graham, you got my vote on that one. It's funny because I'm sort of writing notes, as you see me when I'm looking down, about the future ideal and agencies and the other stuff. And again, Josh, to your point, I'm a big fan with Arbinger. Whenever I get a chance to meet with Chief Wallentyne and sit down and have dinner or conversations with him, we, it's similar conversations, and the stuff that I worked at in other countries, courtesy of the military, very similar for how do we build to the next step, especially when you have polarized, enemy. Literally, the term was enemy, right? We were enemies just a moment ago. And so another interesting thing, there's an old saying, the purpose of Seiza, to sit in meditation, is just that. Once you're sitting, you're doing Seiza. Back to your point, Graham, about listening. If we're in the conversation, you're doing what you need to be done. If a conversation needs to be had, we listen. That's having the conversation. We don't have to get, once we start placing, well, we have to get this done a certain amount of times, this kind of stuff. And this goes back to one of the things that you see being taught a lot nowadays, and maybe it's a future dynamic of the next version of 2.0 of the officer or the agency, is this idea of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the ability, to some degree, there's multiple definitions of it, but the ability to be there in the moment for that person is one potential definition. To listen without passing judgment, to be able to stay a little bit longer before the so-called monkey brain just says, I know what I'm looking at. This is what it is. I got it. And cops are actually rewarded for doing that. In fact, we're punished if we don't. We're punished. Think about the promotions, and I'll offer this to the people out there with bars on your collar and shiny stuff. Think how many times you sat on promotion boards, and Adam, think about infantry and everything else. How many times you've looked at the files, and we look at the person that accomplished the most and the most outcomes, who actually made the decision, even in the absence of information, because we admire that. They're doers, they're actors, they're this. The people that take a little bit longer, they're often viewed as what? Wishy-washy. They're taking a little bit too long. They're indecisive. Are they indecisive, or are they just listening? Now, I'm not arguing for indecisiveness, but I'm saying in complex situations, hanging out a little longer in that which precedes a decision is already shown by multiple levels of research as being valuable. But how often do we in policing reward that? How often do we say it's a good thing to do? How often do we train it? And if so, is that potentially something that the future policing or the future agency or anything else may seek to grow, to actually bring to their cultures? So again, thoughts.
So Doc, that resonates really well with me. I think a lot of times about what I've learned about talent placement in the private sector and how efficient we are. And this is Axon, but I'm sure a lot of private industries like place is best person, right seat. And we get people in law enforcement, and we follow the culture, right? We force people into leadership for promotion versus leaving them in an individual contributor role, right? Things like that, where then we see issues with, I would call it perceived performance, but it's really like the culture has been the priority, not the human. And so I always wonder about that. Like, I wonder if we brought more the way the private sector thinks about the efficiency of talent into the policing world, what kind of outcome you would get. It's kind of interesting.
Well, Andy, would you ever take a first line supervisor from your IT department and promote them up to middle management and put them over your, and I'm trying to go as far left as I can, so help me out, but like research and development? I'm guessing you probably would not. Like, that generally doesn't happen in the private sector. But in military and police department, we say, oh, you're an officer, you meet these standards, you did a good interview, you demonstrate good leadership skills, you're a sergeant. That makes sense to me, right? Like, you're a sergeant, you've worked in patrol. Now we're going to put you over narcotics, which you haven't worked in before. And now from there, Now we're going to promote you up to lieutenant. And now we're going to put you over our training program. And you've never been part of our training program. You've never gone to an instructor development class. You were never an FTO, anything like that. That concept was raised on a thread that I was reading probably last week. And it was the first time I thought about that. Within the police department, we treat ourselves like a paramilitary organization instead of a business structured program. And we have people that are great leaders. They're tremendous leaders. They absolutely understand the human aspects to supervising people within your organization, but we have them supervising processes and tasks that they don't understand. And the answer is always like, well, I'll figure it out as I go, or if I don't, I'll just reach out to one of them and ask. But it does make me wonder if we're building this utopian police department, if perhaps what we do is I want to call it succession planning, but within individual positions, right? Or maybe we should call it grooming. Is that if we know that we're going to need a narcotics supervisor, maybe we take someone from a lateral position and have them shadow for a month or so, so that they can come over and have that ability. But in our triangle organizations here, as we move up, we're supervising more and more specialties. How do we prepare our supervisors to make sure that they are adequately prepared to do that?
No, I was just gonna follow on real quick if I could to that point. Yeah, we focus on the role, not the human in policing, right? So it's like, because they're in this role, they have to go here or have to do this, versus aptitude, desire, performance, passion. Some people desire to promote, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're great people leaders or even want to lead people. And so I think if we had better processes in which to qualify what the person is really built to do, we could run a little bit faster.
No, that's perfect, man. And I mean, think about it. You guys just pointed it out. Could you imagine? Could you imagine that? Hey, you know what? I notice you're really in love with the position you're at, and just so you know, you're the best there is. You've been spending the last 10 years learning everything there is, and it could be an engineer, it could be everything else, IT, I don't care. But you know what? Since you haven't promoted in the last 10 years, we really have some concerns about you. In fact, I don't think you're material for this agency anymore because it's like, are you kidding me? And so to the idea of the future organization, these are conversations, aren't they? These are conversations that leadership goes. And Graham, to your point, leadership has needs. We're going to need succession planning. We're trying to get ahead of the power curve. So let's go and have some conversations about what people want to do. And if in fact they are not yet qualified, to Andy's point, but they have desire, then let's help them. Let's help them get to something that they want to do. It's for the benefit of everybody. And if someone is really, really good at where they're at and they don't want to do anything else, they love their family life, they love the shift they have, they love everything that's helped, and they are value unmeasurable for what they're doing. Let's also reward them, but also ask of them, can you instill that same passion to others that may also just really think about the Gold Shield homicide detective that says, this is it, man. I've made it. And this is what they've always desired. We should reward that. It doesn't mean that one day you have to become a sergeant or anything else. So, and again, this goes from Daniel Pink's work and everybody else. But the fact is, we can take lessons learned from business, from these other things, and as is being pointed out, whether it's process driven or everything else, a lot of that is potentially a culture problem, which is an internal facing self-inflicted gunshot wound, whatever, shot in the foot. And so the thing is, every day in this new ideal, the individual officer and the leadership within the agency and all those interconnections can make a choice to get up and make it a little bit better than it was yesterday, to get up and to simply begin to move it in the direction. One of the natures of complexity and complexity theory is it is not objective driven. Objective driven means I know where the top of the mountain is. I'm doing a plan to get there. Complexity is more the metaphor of constantly steering the boat to get to the continent you want, because you just don't quite know, and everybody keeps changing the freaking mountaintops and the measures that they use every damn day that you wake up. It's called the dancing landscape model. And so if you ever want to read something, for the people listening and for people that are here that are gracious enough to let me ramble, read the 1% Foundation, where basically mentally disabled kid and his father, and he was told, you'll never do the Ironman. Just can't do it, man. You're not good enough. It's not going to happen. His entire thing, and he did eventually, was out of those 3 events, run, swim, and bike, I will get 1% better in one of those events every day. That's it. That's all I have to do. Now, I don't know when I'm going to be able to do it or how it's going to end up, but that is sort of the new culture shift, I would argue, in complexity. This isn't solving stuff. It isn't striving for stuff. Hey, you know what? Tomorrow we're going to be at 67% for criminal this versus that. Well, maybe. How about if we're just less than we were to the degree that we can control? Maybe that's a good goal. But again, I think those are very, very astute observations. So thank you.
Josh, you want to jump in on that point there?
Oh, it seems I'm hearing people talk about, it's almost like we've invited Chief Peter, the principal, to the environment or the conversation. We're confronted with the difference in civil service, and I'm arguing to a deficiency, so forgive me, but when we're in the steps and lanes of negotiated contract, and a person has 15 years in grade or 10 years in grade, and so they want to get paid more, the only way to do that in my organization is to promote. And yes, there can be intrinsic values and appreciations, but no money. And then within the concept of the Peter Principle, you will promote to your level of incompetence. And so likewise, when we have people who are engaged and able to lead, to see people as people, to persuade like a salesperson that this is what you need because I'm divining the need behind your request or your performance. And then we put them in charge of things, or we have people who are good at managing things but not dealing with people, and they promote and don't have the skill to handle the personnel issues and their spans of control. It's very dangerous and can cause problems. That's where, just in my own experience, and to go back to the beginning here, is Chief Dugan is uniquely suited. He can manage things and he can lead people. And so I think that's what we're talking about with what is next in our profession. I believe that we've been very hard on our rank and file officers. We've thrown new technologies, new trainings, new expectations, new boxes on forms, new records management systems, new protocols for stop sticks. And oh, by the way, you got to ask for permission in my agency, which we're working on, Liam. And so all of these things are real. So dare I say, at the command level, I think that the future police departments has to have a laser focus on being hard in the best way on the leaders, to provide the information necessary for the officers, to relieve the pressure when essential, to become students of the game, and to lead those who are emerging from the ranks into the leadership positions into this awareness, so we can perpetuate a generational change, because it is a systems issue. It's a generational issue. And our generation of change will be one generation behind culture's shift that's already underway. And that's a prickly cactus. I think we need to hug it.
I'm going to jump in here with, we have plenty of time left, but almost like summary thoughts. So when you invited me to do this, I started, much like the doctor, started taking notes on things that I thought I would probably want to talk about. And it says culture, technology, and evidence and research. Like, those were the 3 things that I really think that I wanted to talk about when it comes to the future of law enforcement. I like to plug other training organizations, right? So I go to the ILET conference every single March. And I I love the hallway conversations there probably more than anything else. The hallway conversations between classes, after classes, is probably where I learn the most amount of actual information from what other people have learned in their classes. And I found that almost every single year there is there's a general theme to the conference, and it's not intentional. It just happens to be that like this is what these are new classes that trainers are bringing forward. These are new conversations during the Emerson hour. These are new conversations, over drinks at night. One year, very, very much the conversation was officer suicide, officer well-being. Another year, very much the conversation was resilience and in all fashions of resilience. And so I play a game with my professional friends, and I'm like, what do you think this year's theme is going to be, right? Like, what do you think we're going to hear about more than anything else? What are we going to talk about more than anything else? My guess for 2023 is culture. I think the most amount of conversations are going to involve culture, developing culture, fostering culture, the culture of law enforcement and where it should be. And throughout our conversation today, every single one of you at one point has talked about a concept and how that then relates to culture or how it impacts culture. So I think that my theory is still right, but I think that this utopian police department that we're creating for 2050, whatever it is, I think the core foundation of the future of law enforcement is going to be culture. And in an academy level, we are going to have to teach culture in class, and not just the culture of the community that you live in. One example, Louisville Police Department takes their new officers, their trainees, and they drive them into what I would just call the roughest part of town. And they drive them through, but they explain, how there are grocery islands in this, or grocery deserts in this area, right? Like there's no grocery stores, there's no convenience stores, there's no laundromats, because businesses don't want to exist there, which means that mom has to take a bus to drive 90 minutes to go to a grocery store. And by the time she's done that process, the process of grocery shopping is 5 hours, and she can only carry home what she can carry home. So that has to happen multiple times a day. And because of that, people don't want to live in that neighborhood. So because of that, house values don't go up. And so because of that, you don't get generational wealth that's being passed down. And so you have people that are growing up there that are probably going to be stuck in that community for a long time. But they explain the culture of the city that they live in to the officers, right? So that's one way that we have to talk about culture with our academy students. We also have to talk about law enforcement culture. I wish we could draw a line in the sand and just everyone agrees that past faults are forgiven and we're moving forward, because society has wronged the police and the police has wronged society. Historically, it's happened, and in the past we've tried to smooth it over and brush it under carpet, and that was not the right way to do it. Those harms have existed, and it's hard for us to now move forward. I wish that we could just start over with a clean slate, but we need to talk about what law enforcement culture is and how our officers need to exist within law enforcement culture. In the FTO program, we need to our administrators need to understand that your FTOs have more impact on your culture than any other single entity in your police department. It's not administrators, it's not first line supervisors, it's not the peers, it is your field training officers that are going to steer your ship correctly or drive it into an iceberg and sink. Now, you can offer as much training in your department, you can put words in hallways, you can put up posters, you can send out emails, but if your field training officers are not embodying your values, then they are the ones who are running your police department and not you. So we need to understand the importance of fostering our field training officers, about selecting proper field training officers, continually training our field training officers and getting them to understand the impact that they have. For our first line supervisors, we need to understand how they foster their team and how they steer the culture within their own unit. The administration needs to embody the culture that they want to see in their police department. Core values are not core values if they are just words in a hallway. If we're just putting them on a poster, or we're buying vinyl cutouts and we're sticking them in the hallway so that we walk past them every day, that's not core values. If your officers, if you walk into a briefing as a police chief, a captain, a lieutenant, you walk into a briefing and you ask your officers what the core values are, and to either define them or give different definitions of them, or to give examples of them. If they can't do that, then you don't have core values. You have a neat little paragraph within your policy. And then on a community level, we need to be immersed with our community. Our officers need to be out in cultural activities in our community, and our community members need to be involved in our police department and in some of the internal cultural aspects of our police department. So that is my, after hearing everyone speak here, and John was talking earlier about different decision making and slowing down things, and understanding that if the person that you're asking to make a decision isn't making a decision right away, it might be because they're pausing before they develop a response. If our supervisors and trainers can understand that, that's changing the culture of how we train, right? And Andy was talking about bringing in technology that places the complexity on solutions, not on the officer. Well, embracing technology is a cultural change that we need to accept. You know, just around the horn, when I was listening to you guys talk, those are probably my complete thoughts on what the future of law enforcement looks like. It is an absolute focus on implementing, fostering, and steering culture at all levels of law enforcement.
Yeah, well put, brother.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that that you touched on the culture side, and I continue to believe that historically we've done a horrible job between connecting the cultures of the police departments and the communities that they serve, and we've over time put ourselves in silos as, hey, we're the police, you're the community, when the reality is we are the community because we live and work in the community. And it's an easy thing to say. I don't think it's an easy thing to prove or, essentially demonstrate unless you demonstrate it. And so I think about, going through the defund movement and stuff. And some of that was politically unavoidable because as unfortunately the media has tried to teach us how to think about each other versus just putting people in a room and letting them have a conversation. But, there were so many examples. You guys were talking about optics earlier, life-saving devices. I remember we were just trying to get light kits on our pistols in Charlotte, and the police department didn't want to do this. The chain of command didn't want to do it because they were worried about being too tactical in nature, when the reality is light kits are just a phenomenal tool in just take the narrow part of threat recognition, right? Understanding what is happening in front of you. And you guys all, I'm sure, remember the attack on all the armor as military, vehicles and stuff like that. In reality, they're life-saving assets. And so it's how we communicate that to our communities based on the resources we need. I think where we have fallen a little bit short in the past is the way we communicate that. So if I'm in a community and I need an asset, the resources needed to deliver that. Liam, I'm talking to you now since you're chief of police. So, yeah, by the way, this is horribly imperfect and I've never been in your role. So I'm just going to make some assumptions. But I mean, the reality is, like, if you don't communicate the outcome desired based on the thing that you need, and that could be training, it could be equipment, it could be whatever, why would the community invest in that and make that a funding priority? So I think that's one area that we can continue to evolve and just get more efficient in how we communicate the needs and resources, tying it to outcomes. And everybody cares about the positive outcomes. I don't know.
Yeah, if I can, Andy, I'd like to just super quick jump in, because I always, anytime we talk about outcomes, and this kind of wraps everything we've been talking about, John, Doc, you talked about earlier, communities tend to focus solely on outcomes. What is the outcome? Do I have a safer community? That armor saved a citizen, right? For me internally, the process is far more important. In fact, if I could be massively irresponsible, I'll say, I don't care about the outcome. I do care about the process because I can't control the outcome. However, Andy, your point's exactly right. They're inextricably tied together, whether it's funding or support, what have you. How do we talk about what are the outcomes we desire as a profession, as an agency, as a city? What are the processes that our people undertake toward those outcomes? they're just inextricably tied and need to be communicated more. Maybe that's the thing that this profession needs to do better. Whatever better means is be better communicators with our stakeholders, with our citizens about what are the processes we undertake. How do we come to agreement on what outcomes we desire while accepting they won't always happen that way?
You know, it's interesting. We have this conversation a lot. John knows we have this conversation a lot internally with ILET, with our founding members, but it comes down to understanding your kind of area of operations and what battlefield are you actually on, right? And I use a military term, but the idea is this. You know, we try to push. We know, the trainers know, Graham knows, Liam and you know, Josh, you and Andy, you guys have all been DT and use force instructors, right? Hey, I know this is a best practice. We need to implement X, Y, or Z. And that gets shot up the chain of command and it doesn't go anywhere. Why doesn't it go anywhere? Because we don't do a good enough job articulating the need for that or the benefit of it to those other levels, because we're operating in a battle space that is completely different than what they understand. And so I think when we talk about the future, and this is conversations that we have every single week with ILET, which is why I'm so excited to have all of you be part of it, is because, you know, we talk about contextualizing information. And so I have an experienced instructor here who knows, because of their time on the ground and their knowledge and education, that this is the best step forward for our agency. Now we have to figure out how to articulate that and explain it in terms of liability, in terms of financial impact and benefit to the municipality and the people that carry the checkbooks, because they don't care about your experience. They care about, is your request of X amount of dollars going to save me money or not? That's what they need to know. There is so much good work being done. I mean, Andy, I told you this, the fact that you guys brought Renee on for research, that, you know, the American Society for Evidence-Based Policing is leading the way in taking this information that we know exists. We have the data. We have to articulate it and contextualize it for people in a way that they understand, not the law enforcement military way of understanding, the academic and political way of understanding. And that's the conversations that have to happen. We have to learn how to contextualize the information differently. So for me, I know that my officers are going to be safer by doing the X amount of training. What I need to do is be able to articulate to the people that control the money that if I take this $50,000 to develop this type of training for, say, our use of force, that is going to equate to a reduction of X amount of percentage in use of force incidents during the year of operations, which reduces our overall liability and civil action against the department by $3 million over the course of the next 5 years. They go, oh, so my $50,000 per year for 5 years is $250,000, but I save $3 million in the long run. That makes sense. Where do I sign? But we don't know how to. We're not good enough at doing that yet, and there's so many hoops we have to jump through. The conversation needs to be had is, how do we contextualize it from our battle space to that battle space? And that's kind of one of the passion projects that we have here at ILET.
Yeah, so guys, and Adam and I do arm wrestling over this, so he already knows where this next part's going to go, which is I throw in a couple things. First of all, I agree with everything. It's not that. But again, as I say, it's maybe perhaps in some cases a little bit more nuanced. I threw a couple things in our chat. Adam's more than welcome to throw them into the other chats as well. But one of the interesting things, first of all, I absolutely agree. We have to have conversations, right? Conversations create exposure. And these are conversations without judgment. These are conversations simply to have the conversation. We expose ourselves to other cultures. Another culture can be just simply a different age group within our agency. It could be exposing ourselves to management. It could be civilian. It could be this. It could be whatever. But conversations allow for exposure. And the conversations are not just this. Back to Graham's point, maybe our conversation is our engagement multi-channel in a digital space. But conversations are the first step, which is awareness. But the other part that's interesting about this is communicating through ignorance is another problem. And if you think about some of the research that we have, and a classic study with Ronald Fryer, when he did it, is that's the difference about someone that can reason when he took a look at the disparity, his perceived hypothesis, the disparity of lethal force against African Americans in certain population sets, But because he looked at it from a thing of reason, he's just an amazing economist. But because he looked at that, he was able to, through an empirical way, say, you know what, the data doesn't support that. Back to Renee and everything else that you guys are doing. And Renee and I have conversations, and Andy, she's a 10, man. So you guys are, she's a 10. So the thing is, the very nature of science was about discovering falsibility. We constantly are proving something false and moving to the next thing. So stop, just relax. It's okay if something's wrong. We can play with it. It's okay if we're wrong. We can have conversations. But I threw gapminder.org because think about the conversations we're having. The person on the other side of the conversation has to be to a degree of receptivity to actually listen to the conversation. There's an old saying, it's an old Japanese proverb, there's no sense talking to a frog in a well about the ocean. I use it more often than not now, which is why I beat my head and my bourbon budget has gone out the freaking roof. But that's another story in another time. But what I'm getting at is we have to find ways to get them to, and us, to suspend our misbeliefs. Suspending the misbelief is one of the first steps to having a meaningful conversation. So back to context and this and that is, for example, Adam, like what you just said, we don't necessarily know, and to Liam's point, we don't know where this outcome is going to be. We can't give, well, I'd love to give you a dollar figure. It's 3 million. It might be. It might actually get worse next year, even though we're doing the right thing through no reason of our own. So having the conversations about why we do something, what it really is. Well, you know, according to all the stuff, I look at that. Obviously, all you guys do is beat each other and you beat civilians and you do this. Well, I don't have any problem with you believing that because your information streams would lead anybody that looks at that to believe that. I'm not mad at you for that. But let's talk about how we might learn about more stuff. And then also, never do that part. And so I think to frame this back to the idea of culture change and that kind of stuff is almost all culture change starts with those conversations with acceptable facts. And that's where the gapminder.org got to. The argument of Rosling there was there's no sense having all these conversations if you can't even agree on what we can call factual something, knowledge. We have to start having those conversations first. Then after there, we can start arm wrestling about the so-called subjective value of those and how we want the world to be. But to everybody's stuff that you mentioned, and I wholeheartedly support and actually help with this stuff, is if we don't have those conversations, it ain't going to get any better. We have to have them. And we're not having them because we're uncomfortable, because we're afraid that we're going to look bad, because someone else is going to rat us out because we said the wrong word at the wrong place. Just the nature of the beast, man. We're going to have to roll with it and everything else. But if we don't have the conversations, it isn't going to get any better. So again, just 2 cents again.
And thanks for that, John. And unfortunately, we're coming up on our time today. As with every single roundtable we do, it seems like we always run out of time right when we're starting to get into conversation, which is completely fine. I'm sure this will be one of many, especially with this group. I'm excited to invite all of you back. This has been phenomenal. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go around one more time and give you the opportunity to say any last thoughts or to kind of wrap up a little bit of what we had here today or any words of wisdom that you might have. And then what I'll do then is I just have a few last minute points and I'll ask all of the panelists here to stick around for just a quick AAR after we kill the live feed. But we'll go from there. So Andy, hate to throw you under the bus, brother, but you're first. Any thoughts on the conversation today?
You know, we've been trying to unpack this school shooting stuff for a while from a tech perspective. Like, how do we end this thing? And especially after Uvalde, Rick took it very, very personally, and as most of us did. And this is it was a little controversial when it came out, but how do we put a taser on a drone? How do we be more efficient? How do we do something that creates seconds of response, not minutes and things like that? And so, you know, that got kind of a negative reaction from the media and from the public and things like that. And the reality is, you know, a lot of people that had a negative reaction were not thinking about the outcome. They were thinking about the thing being a drone that had a weapon on it, even though that was less than lethal. And I would say, any final thoughts from me would be, you're not going to be able to control where people get their information, but for sure, if you're in policing and customer facing, meaning public facing or in police leadership, you absolutely should try to be a source of solid and positive information with your community. And that was one lesson we learned from that whole thing that kind of got thrown back in our face, but we're still going to figure that out, by the way.
We, if anybody's wondering, Andy and I actually did a podcast, and we discussed that a little bit, and it was really great. You can go check that out. We'll even link it below this, maybe afterwards. And I'll bring this up now, but if you guys aren't already aware, TaserCon is taking place in January 23rd to 26th in Las Vegas. Again, I'm going to be there. Andy will be there. A lot of the speakers and presenters you've seen here are going to be there, and it's not a taser training event. I mean, granted, there is going to be a master instructor course being run alongside it, but you can imagine what you've seen here at ILET, the conversations that were, this is what Andy and I had discussed. It's a kind of an in-person version of what we're doing here at ILET. It's about taking and changing the standard of law enforcement from multiple facets. So I'm excited to be there, and excited that you guys are putting that on. So I appreciate that, and appreciate you having me a part of it. Graham.
Yeah, so my final thoughts are that culture is the future. Culture is absolutely the future of law enforcement. In order to change culture, you have to have trust. People have to be able to trust you. And the only way to develop trust is by showing vulnerability. So just a reminder to our FTOs, our trainers, our leaders, our officers, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to be flawed. That's how people learn that you're an actual human being, and that's going to make them more likely to follow you, which will allow you to impact that future. I wanted to echo what I just heard about having an open mindset. Basically, we have to make sure that we're getting away from training incest, that we're not just reusing the same PowerPoint that we have for the last 35 years that's been handed down, that we're not just using trainers from within our own departments. We have to get out there. You have to expand your mind. You have to get new information. Very early on, Liam said that the only reason we know anything is because someone else was willing to share it, right? Well, we can only get that information if we're willing to open our ears and hear it. So American Society for Evidence-Based Policing, their conference is phenomenal. It's not like a law enforcement conference that I've been to before. It's a bunch of people who believe in science and evidence and proving anecdotal information. The ILETA conference, International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association, that's every single March. That's one of the biggest collection of training that you can get in a 40-hour week. Blue to Gold, Anthony Bandiero has a training organization. That guy churns out so much free training that I don't understand how his company's surviving. He puts out free 90-minute webinars almost on a weekly basis. It's mostly has to do with case law, Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. He's an attorney. He's a prior cop. Subscribe to his free training. It costs you nothing, and it's absolutely invaluable. And then, of course, the most important organization of them all, the National Association of Field Training Officers, which is nafto.org. Our conference is in June in Phoenix. It's arguably the greatest conference that you'll ever go to in your entire life. But all of those organizations are worthwhile of attending, of going to their website, of just checking out and just expanding your mind. And then a quick plug for one of my favorite books, which is Thinking Different by Adam Grant, which basically explains how we go through the process of maybe accepting information that we were hesitant to at first. But expand your mind, show vulnerability, impact the culture in your agency, no matter what level of administration or officer you're at. This profession is in our hands, and I believe it's a profession, but it's in our hands, and the future of it is going to take it wherever we steer it. So, Adam, thanks for having me lunch.
Well, thank you for doing all of my work for me. It's going to make wrapping this up real simple. To Graham's point, if you have any opportunity to attend any of those conferences that he had mentioned, obviously ILET is a part of all of those. We support it. I'm going to be down there. You get the chance to hang out with us. But like Graham said, it's unmatched, the amount of information, and it's not necessarily the training you get, it's the relationships you build. And that's really the core component of this. And again, just kind of like with Josh and Chip, Graham brought up Anthony. Anthony also, today we have a session from Anthony on the ILET Summit. So if you're not already signed up for the summit, you can go watch one of Anthony's trainings from Blue to Gold. And we're going to be partnering with Blue to Gold with ILET, and making all of that available on all ILET platforms as well, because like Graham said, it is a phenomenal resource, and Anthony is doing a whole ton of work, and he definitely deserves a recognition for it. So thank you, brother. John.
Yeah, so real quick, already covered most of it, but the first thing is just thanks to the panel for being here. Thanks to everybody listening. Thanks to everybody doing what you're doing. And this is putting a different hat on now. Former lieutenant, former sergeant major in SF, former a lot of things, both classified, unclassified. For all the people listening, everybody here, you are appreciated. Make no mistake that what you do is meaningful, even though it's frustrating sometimes. And the effects of what you do today, you may not even see until 10 or 20 years from now. When someone comes back and something that you thought was just so mundane literally saved their lives or changed the entire trajectory of something. So again, you have my utmost respect, my utmost appreciation. Keep doing what you're doing. Be gentle with each other. Back to Liam's point, adaptation and culture transformation takes time. It took us a while to get to where we're at. It's going to take us a while to transform that. And my argument is, if you want to transform, if you want to evolve, it's not about throwing the old out. It's adding something to it. Stop this A-B bivalent thinking. It's A and B and other things that you don't yet see, and focus on understanding. Focus on the sense making of the world, and you will change the outcomes. They will organically shift on their own. So again, to ILET and everybody else doing all the great things you're doing, thank you.
Thanks, John. Liam.
Yeah, first, Graham, congrats on your leadership award. It's super clear. You're just an awesome guy, awesome human, and you also happen to do a difficult job. So thanks for that. Adam, you and your crew and everyone else for what you're putting together. Really, really appreciate that work too. To anyone watching, I'm talking specifically to our coppers out there. It can be really easy to feel like you are victims these days, victims of your legislators, victims of the laws or the policies or anything. Listen to me. You aren't a victim of anything. You are in this job by choice. No one's keeping you here. And I'm so massively appreciative that you choose to do this job. So choose to get better every day. Understand you can control very little in this world, but you can impact and influence a heck of a lot. So remember, that's a choice. The last two things are questions I always talk with my leadership group about. The first question anyone should be asking is, what do I own of this? What do I own of my own successes and failures? What do I own of this thing that just happened? What do I own of where we want to go? If you start with that question, looking internally first, you'll be surprised how much success you can have. And the third thing is this is true. Start with, why are things going well? The women and men that do this job are really good at it under really hard circumstances. And if we take the look first as what's going well and why, if we start there instead of why did it go wrong, you'll be shocked at how much information you will figure out to be able to break it apart and then do more of what's going well. So thank you so much for everyone that's facilitated this panel. You guys are awesome. I just appreciate the chance to sit and hang with you all for a bit.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate you being here, brother. And last but not least, Josh, obviously our last minute addition to the panel and unplanned, but appreciate you are here, dude. Any thoughts?
Thank you. It was a pleasant surprise to be asked to speak on Liam's great behavior and performance, outstanding leadership. So congratulations. To those who have been joining us, Jeffrey, specifically Odin Training, Dan Green, I see Alina, I believe, and Edward, thank you for contributing to the chat. What I've been hearing for the last 2 hours, really the best 2 hours of my day, is that transformational leaders are transformational leader, leaders who translate. I totally screwed that up. It sounded better in my head. We translate information. Dare to be the leader that defines reality for your staff, for those that work above you in the span of control, those that work within your span of control, not to tell them how to think, but to encourage them to think. The concept exists that thinking is difficult and therefore we judge. It's a human tendency. And throughout the last 2 hours, what I've heard is intentional thoughts and processes about how to touch the hearts of our human beings in these police uniforms, to empower them and encourage them, in the words of a firearms instructor, to aim small so you'll miss small. But what we mustn't forget is you also have to aim high. And when you aim high while aiming small, even if you miss, you're still far above any objective you may have thought possible in the past. Thanks to ILET and the panel for a wonderful discussion. I look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Right on, brother. Well, I appreciate you being here, and obviously for your kind words for Liam at the beginning here. And so I'll just ask everybody to hang around for the panel, and I'm going to end this out here and thanking everybody for joining us for this roundtable here at the ILET Summit. Obviously, it's been a great conversation. I've been honored and excited to be able to put this out for everybody. This entire week, as a matter of fact, has been phenomenal, and I couldn't have done it, and this whole event couldn't have happened without the amazing support from the panelists you see here, the dozens of instructors that donated their time and energy, all of our amazing sponsors and partners. Just it's the list is so long. We'd be here for another hour for me to thank everybody. So just know that I appreciate every single person who's attended the training, who supported the training, and there's a lot to look forward to, especially here with ILET. I do want to do another quick shout out, obviously, to Liam who won the 2022 Instructor of the Year award here at ILET. And for Graham, who is our inaugural Leadership Through Action Award recipient. Both of you guys are absolutely phenomenal role models, and you are people that in this industry a lot of us look up to, and just continue what you're doing. You guys are phenomenal. I appreciate you so much. That is going to end it here for the ILET Summit, but we're going to be rolling this out for another week, at least till the 16th. So you have time to go back and see the training. There's going to be more coming up down the pipe. We actually even have more training sessions that we didn't even get out there yet this week, so there's going to be more added to it yet. And in the new year, stay tuned, because we're going to be launching our ILET community platform. If you thought all the training was great, we are launching a fully built out communities platform specifically for law enforcement and public safety. It's going to center around communities of practice and understanding. All of these conversations that we're having here are going to be conversations that we are going to be able to have on the ILET platform. It is going to be available in over 70 languages. We are using a backend that is the UN uses currently, and the idea is to give access. Access and communication is going to be the priority. We talk about what is the future of policing. It is making sure that this red tape, all of this, like Graham had mentioned, this inbreeding model of we don't want to share our toys. This is how we do things with our agency. We can't do that anymore. We have to start sharing knowledge, sharing our information, and making sure that people have access to it. Whether you're a super small agency or detachment with 2 or 3 officers, or you're a massive organization like the NYPD or the FBI. It doesn't matter. We need to share knowledge, and we have to communicate, and we have to collaborate. And when we do that, we're going to make this better for everybody. So thank you so much for joining us here at the 3rd annual ILET Summit. Stay tuned. Next year, we're going to be making our announcements for next year's event very, very shortly, and cannot wait for that. So thank you guys again. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.